Hey there, fellow philosophy fans. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're going to be tackling cosmology and theology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and specifically kind of how modern cosmology with its big bangs,
Right,
multiverses and all that, shapes up, like our traditional theological ideas
right.
about, creation and all that.
Yeah.
Our guide for this deep dive is going to be the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry
Okay.
on cosmology and theology.
Excellent source.
Yeah, so I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah,
So it's always fascinating to kind of think about, like, humans have always tried to make sense of the universe.
of course. Yeah.
Right. And for so long, those explanations were just intertwined with ideas about a deity.
Right.
But now we have scientific cosmology,
Yeah.
which relies on, observation, mathematics, testable predictions.
Sure.
So it leads to this kind of question, do these two ways of knowing clash? Or can they coexist?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, it's one that's been plaguing thinkers and theologians for centuries.
Yeah.
But it's particularly relevant, I think, now with the advancements in, modern cosmology.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so I think we can't talk about cosmology and theology without addressing, the elephant or the Big Bang in the room, right?
Sure, sure.
This mind-blowing concept that the universe started from a single point has been expanding ever since.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't always this accepted view, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, even Einstein himself, right, initially
Oh, yeah.
favored a static universe. And
Uh-huh.
it was only with the discovery of redshift data,
Uh-huh.
right, where light from distant galaxies is stretches, basically shifting towards the red end of the spectrum, indicating they're moving away from us,
Okay.
that the idea of an expanding universe really gained traction.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of it like the Doppler effect with sound.
Right.
Right. As an ambulance approaches you,
Uh-huh.
the siren's pitch gets higher, but as it moves away, it gets lower, right?
Right, right.
Similarly, light from receding galaxies kind of stretches
Oh, okay.
as they move away. And so this redshift data really led to the development of the Friedman-Robertson-Walker models, FRW for short,
Okay.
which describe a universe expanding from this very hot, dense state.
Okay. And that hot, dense state, rewinding the clock all the way back,
Yeah,
is what leads us to the Big Bang.
that's right.
Okay, now, for some theists, they seem to confirm this idea of creation ex nihilo,
Right,
the creation out of nothing.
right.
Like God said, bang, and boom, there's the universe.
Sure, yeah.
Case closed, right?
Well, not so fast. I
Okay.
mean, while the Big Bang might seem to fit, neatly
Uh-huh.
with the idea of ex nihilo creation,
Yeah.
things get a little bit more complicated when you kind of look closer.
Okay.
And, even within the ism itself, like the idea of creation has multiple interpretations.
Okay.
Right. So some believe in a finite universe with a definite beginning, while others see God's creation as like a timeless dependence.
Okay.
Right, not bound by like our linear understanding of time.
Okay.
So there are these different interpretations.
So that kind of raises the question of, then why did a timeless God choose a specific point in time
Right.
to initiate creation?
Absolutely. It's a question that theologians and philosophers have, grappled with for centuries.
Uh-huh.
And it gets even more kind of complex when you consider the potential challenges of like really reconciling the Big Bang with ex nihilo creation.
Okay, so what challenges are we talking about here?
Well, for example, like if ex nihilo creation is a truly miraculous event,
Uh-huh.
right, something beyond the laws of nature,
Yeah.
should we even expect those very laws to be able to like fully
I
explain
see what you're saying.
or predict it, right? It's like expecting, the laws of physics to explain how a magician pulls a rabbit out of a cat.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So our tools for understanding the natural world
Right.
might not be adequate
Exactly.
to explain something that transcends those very laws.
Exactly. And then there's the question of like, how do we reconcile specific cosmological models
Okay.
with the concept of ex nihilo creation, right? Like, does the singularity in
Yeah.
the FRW model, that initial point of infinite density,
Hmm.
does that really represent nothingness in a philosophical sense?
Yeah, that's a good one for us philosophers to
Right.
think about.
What is nothingness?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay.
And on top of that, like, even the very notion of a cause, right,
Mhm.
for the universe
Mhm.
gets tricky
Right.
when we're dealing with a potential beginning of time itself.
Right, right. So the Big Bang, while groundbreaking,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily solve all these mysteries of
No.
creation.
No. In fact, it might raise
Yeah, to
more
raise more, yeah.
than it answers.
Yeah.
And to make things even more intriguing, some argue that the Big Bang actually disconfirms theism.
Wait, how could the Big Bang point away from a creator?
Well, these are what sometimes are called Big Bang atheologians.
Okay.
They suggest that, the universe arising from a natural process,
Okay.
even one as extraordinary as the Big Bang, eliminates the need for a supernatural explanation.
So like nature did it, not God.
In essence, yeah.
Okay.
But the conversation doesn't end there.
Okay.
Because, the Big Bang isn't the only cosmological model out there.
Right.
Right? There are alternative theories.
Okay.
Some of which challenged the whole universe had a beginning idea altogether.
Okay, that raises a question I've always kind of wondered about.
Yeah.
If the universe had no beginning, what does that mean for causality?
That's a great question.
I know.
Yeah, and one that leads us to these alternative cosmologies.
Okay.
But before we kind of dive into those, I think maybe we'll let these
Yeah.
Big Bang complexities sink in a little.
Yeah, definitely. A lot to think about there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've seen how the Big Bang, kind of a cornerstone of modern cosmology,
Right.
doesn't necessarily provide like a neat and tidy answer to the question of creation.
Definitely not.
Right. And it, as you pointed out, it opens up this whole can of worms about causality and time and the nature of nothingness.
Right, yeah, like what is nothingness?
Exactly.
Right.
Right. So it really kind of makes you question some fundamental assumptions, I think.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, but I'm also like really intrigued
Yeah.
by these alternative cosmological models.
Right.
You mentioned like the ones that challenge the whole
Yeah.
universe had a beginning idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's start with the steady state theories.
Okay.
Okay, so these propose a universe that's infinite in age,
Okay.
always expanding, but with matter continuously being created to keep the overall density constant.
Okay, so instead of a single
Right.
explosive creation event, it's just like
It's this ongoing
yeah.
process of creation.
Okay.
Right. Happening throughout the universe. So it's always becoming, always in flux,
Okay.
but with an overall kind of unchanging appearance.
Okay.
Right. And it's governed by what's called the perfect cosmological principle.
Okay.
The idea that the universe on a large scale looks the same in all places and at all times.
That's a pretty radical idea, right?
It is. It's
Like
that-
no beginning, no end, just this like
this eternal,
yeah.
self-sustaining existence.
Yeah, and so I mean it's interesting how that challenges our kind of traditional theological views
Absolutely.
of creation, right?
It does. I mean, for theists who hold a kind of literal interpretation of creation ex nihilo,
Yeah.
a universe with an infinite past is kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it would seem to imply that like God wasn't necessary to kickstart the whole thing.
Right, exactly. But as we've seen, like theological interpretations are rarely that straightforward.
Right.
Right. So some theists actually embraced the steady state theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and found ways to reconcile it with their beliefs.
Okay, how did they like try and fit an eternal universe into, a creation narrative?
Well, some drew on the concept of creation continuance.
Okay.
Right. So the idea that God's creation is this ongoing sustaining process, not just a one-time event at the beginning of time.
Okay, so it's almost like instead of God being this clockmaker who like wound up the universe and let it go,
Right.
it's more like he's a constant force
Yeah.
that's like perpetually bringing the universe into being.
Exactly. Yeah. It shifts the focus from a kind of temporal beginning to
Okay.
an ongoing dependence on God for existence.
Oh, okay, that's a very clever way to like bridge that gap, between an eternal universe and a creator deity.
Right. But you're right. I mean, I imagine not all these were really on board with that interpretation.
Yeah.
Right? For some, it seemed to like diminish God's role.
Right.
Right. Make him almost kind of superfluous in this eternally existing universe.
Right. Okay, but steady state.
Yeah.
It's just one.
This is just one of many alternatives.
Okay, so what other like cosmological
Yeah.
mind benders are out there?
Well, we have what are called cyclic cosmologies.
Okay.
Okay. So imagine a universe that endlessly expands and contracts,
Okay.
like a cosmic heartbeat.
Okay.
Each cycle begins with a big bang-like event,
Mm-hmm.
followed by expansion,
Okay.
then contraction leading to a big crunch,
Okay.
and then another bang, and so on and so on.
So no ultimate beginning or end.
No
Just
ultimate beginning or
this
ends.
eternal dance of like creation and destruction.
Exactly. Yeah, and this idea of a cyclical universe, I mean, it's been around for centuries,
Wow.
even before modern cosmology.
Yeah, it's fascinating how like these, you know, ancient ideas
Yeah.
sometimes find like new life
Right.
in the light of modern science.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, but what about like the implications for theology then?
Yeah.
Does a cyclical universe make it like easier or harder
Yeah.
to reconcile with theistic beliefs?
Well, it really depends on the specific theological framework you're working with,
Okay.
right? But for some, the cyclical nature of the universe really resonates with ideas of like rebirth and
Yeah.
renewal,
Uh-huh.
right? Even resurrection.
Okay.
It could be seen as a reflection of, you know, God's eternal nature, right?
Right.
Outside of time and constantly kind of bringing forth new creations.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see how that
Yeah.
interpretation would appeal to, certain traditions.
Sure.
But but wouldn't like a universe that kind of gets wiped clean with each cycle
Yeah.
pose a problem for like the idea of a linear history, a final judgment?
Absolutely. I mean, it raises all sorts of questions about the continuity of identity, right?
Right.
And the meaning of individual existence and the nature of divine justice.
Yeah, it's like if the slate gets wiped clean each time,
Right.
does anything we do even matter?
Exactly.
Right.
It's a profound question, and one that, philosophers and theologians have been pondering for ages.
Right.
But before we get too lost in the existential angst here,
Yeah.
there's another cosmological contender that we need to explore.
Okay.
And that is the multiverse.
Ah, yes, the multiverse. So this idea that our universe is just one of countless universes
Countless universe.
bubbling away in some grand cosmic foam.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's really a concept that stretches the imagination.
It is.
How did we go from a single universe
Yeah.
to this mind-boggling idea of a multiverse?
Well, I mean, the path to the multiverse is paved with some pretty complex physics.
Okay.
But one of the key stepping stones, I think, comes from string theory,
Okay.
right? So string theory attempts to kind of unify all the forces of nature,
Okay.
including gravity,
Right.
by proposing that the fundamental building blocks of the universe aren't like point-like particles,
Right.
but tiny vibrating strings.
Okay, I'm vaguely familiar with string theory, but how do vibrating strings lead to multiple universes?
Right. Well, so string theory requires these extra spatial dimensions
Okay.
beyond the three that we experience in our everyday lives.
Okay.
Okay, so imagine them like curled up so tiny that we can't perceive them.
Okay.
And the way these extra dimensions are compactified, basically the specific way they fold and curl, can lead to like a vast landscape
Okay.
of possible universes.
So there could be universes out there
Yes.
with like different laws of physics, different fundamental forces,
Different laws of physics, different fundamental forces, maybe even different types of matter.
different types of matter. Wow.
Yeah. Right. And the number of these possible universes is thought to be just incredibly vast.
Wow.
Maybe even infinite.
Okay, so that's the multiverse.
That's the multiverse.
This just like bewildering array of universes,
Bewildering array.
each like unique expression of physical reality.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing, I have to say. But here's a question that kind of pops into my mind.
Yeah.
If these other universes exist,
Right.
could they potentially have different types of deities?
Whoa.
Or even like completely different
That's
religious frameworks?
Now that's a fascinating philosophical thought experiment.
Right.
I mean, it kind of takes the whole like God of the gaps argument
Right.
to a whole new level, right?
Right.
I mean, if we find evidence for a multiverse, does that mean we need to start thinking about like a multi-deity situation?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really kind of throws a wrench into traditional theological concepts.
Yeah, it does. But let's just, for the sake of this conversation,
Sure.
stick with like the implications for our universe
Right.
and our own religious ideas. Does the existence of a multiverse like diminish the significance of
Yeah.
our own universe?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the key questions
Yeah.
that theologians have kind of grappled with.
Okay.
Some see it as a threat to theistic belief,
Uh-huh.
right? Arguing that it undermines this idea of a universe created specifically for us, right?
Yeah.
With humanity at its center.
Yeah, it's more of
It
a...
becomes more of a cosmic coincidence than a divine plan.
Right. It's like if there are an infinite number of universes,
Yeah,
our existence becomes just one possibility
right.
among countless others.
Right, exactly.
Not so special after all.
Yeah, not so special. That's one way to look at it. But
Yeah.
as always, there are other theological perspectives,
Okay.
right? Some argue that God could have created a multiverse,
Okay.
perhaps as an expression of his infinite creativity. Right, so instead of creating just one masterpiece, God created an entire gallery,
Oh, wow.
each universe a unique work of art.
So instead of like a single carefully crafted universe, we have this like
It's like a cosmic
cosmic art
art exhibit, exactly.
just a display of God's like boundless imagination.
Exactly.
All right.
And this interpretation actually leads to kind of a fascinating argument in favor of theism.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, some theists argue that the sheer improbability of a life-permitting universe arising by chance, even in this vast multiverse,
Okay.
points towards purposeful design.
So it's like, yeah, there might be a multiverse, but even with all those possibilities,
Even with all those possibilities,
it still took something special to create a universe like ours.
it took something special,
Yeah.
right? And this brings us to what's called the anthropic principle,
Okay.
right? The idea that that we observe a universe fine-tuned for life
Uh-huh.
because, well, if it wasn't fine-tuned, we wouldn't be here to observe it.
Right.
Right. So some see the anthropic principle, especially in the context of a multiverse,
Yeah.
as supporting evidence for a creator.
So the multiverse, while seemingly like pushing God further away,
Right.
could actually be used as an argument for his existence.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a fascinating twist.
It is.
And it really, I think, shows how the dialogue between cosmology and theology
Yeah.
is rarely simple or one-sided.
Right.
Right? They constantly kind of challenge and inform each other,
Uh.
leading to, new insights and interpretations.
That's a good point. But even with all these like mind-boggling possibilities,
Yeah,
we have to remember that the universe, whether singular or part of a multiverse,
right.
is ultimately governed by, physical laws.
By physical laws.
And those laws, point towards a future
Yeah,
that might not be so rosy for life as we know it.
that's right. Yeah, so we've explored these different models of the universe's origin.
Right.
But I think now it's time to kind of turn our attention to its potential end,
Okay.
to the realm of eschatology.
The end of the universe.
Yes.
The cosmic apocalypse. I mean, that's definitely a topic that's going to get anyone's attention.
It will.
But isn't that like more of a religious concept?
Yeah.
Like, what does science have to say about the end of the universe?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that there's a whole field called physical eschatology,
Okay.
which explores the universe's long-term future based on our current understanding of physics.
So scientists are actually trying to predict how the universe is going to end.
They are.
Like, is it going to go out with a bang or a whimper or
Exactly.
a cosmic shrug?
A cosmic shrug, yeah.
Okay.
So the predictions, vary
Yeah.
depending on what cosmological model you're using.
Right.
But for like an ever-expanding universe,
Uh-huh.
the most kind of widely accepted scenario is this gradual cooling and dimming,
Okay.
leading to a state known as the heat death.
Heat death, that sounds kind of bleak.
Yeah, it's not the most cheerful outcome, admittedly.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, the universe eventually reaches a state of what's called maximum entropy,
Okay.
where everything is uniformly cold and dispersed.
Okay.
Stars burn out, black holes evaporate.
Uh-huh.
The universe just becomes this vast, empty graveyard.
Okay, I'm officially depressed now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Are there any more like optimistic endings to the cosmic story?
Well, some, alternative cosmological models, as we've discussed,
Yeah.
propose these cyclical universes.
Right.
Where expansion is followed by contraction,
Yeah.
leading to a big crunch, followed by another big bang, and so on forever.
So just like a cosmic dance of creation and destruction, just repeating endlessly.
Repeating endlessly. And that's kind of poetic.
It is in a morbid sort of way.
In a morbid sort of way, exactly.
But even those models, I mean, they don't necessarily offer like a happy ending
Right.
for life as we know it.
Right. So even even if the universe goes through these cycles of
Yeah.
expansion and contraction, it's not clear if life could actually survive those transitions,
Okay.
right? Each cycle might just erase all traces of the previous one,
Yeah.
wipe the cosmic slate clean.
So even in a cyclical universe, there's still a sense of finality,
There is.
like a potential end
Yeah, there is a potential A.
to everything we know and love.
Indeed. So the universe, as we understand it, is not a perpetual motion machine,
Right.
right? Even if it doesn't end in a single definitive event,
Yeah.
there's always this possibility of change,
Right.
of transformation, and yes, even ultimate demise.
Heavy stuff, but before we get to like existential,
Yeah.
I'm curious how theists have like responded to these scientific predictions
Yeah.
about the universe's fate. Like, does physical eschatology conflict with, religious beliefs
Right.
about the end times?
That's a great question, and one that's generated a lot of discussion and debate.
Okay.
Some theists see no conflict between physical eschatology and religious eschatology,
Okay.
right? Arguing that they're kind of operating on different levels of understanding.
Okay. So like science is describing the physical processes
The physical process.
of the universe's end,
Right.
while religion is more addressing the spiritual or symbolic.
Only spiritual or symbolic meaning of those events.
Okay.
Right. So it's not about the universe literally ending,
Right.
but about like a profound change in our relationship with God.
Okay.
Or the divine.
Okay, that makes sense. But I mean, I imagine other theists
Sure.
who take a more literal view
Absolutely.
that biblical eschatology
Right.
might struggle.
Yeah, I mean, if the universe is going to end in a heat death, trillions of years from now,
Right.
what does that mean for the idea of a divine judgment or a second coming?
Right.
That's supposed to happen much sooner, right?
Right.
So it's a real challenge to reconcile those timelines.
Yeah.
And it's led some theists to, reject or reinterpret certain aspects of a traditional eschatology.
So it seems like cosmology just keeps throwing these curveballs
It does.
at theology.
It does.
And forcing it to like adapt and evolve.
In a way, yes, but I think the relationship between cosmology and theology isn't just about resolving like potential conflicts,
Right.
or reinterpreting old doctrines,
Right.
right? It also involves grappling with some like really profound philosophical questions.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, well, let's consider the concept of infinity,
Right.
We've talked about universes with infinite past,
Right.
universes that cycle endlessly. But what about a universe with infinite size?
Right. That's always like blown my mind. Like a universe that just goes on.
It's almost
Roughly.
impossible
Yeah.
to grasp, and it raises some unique theological challenges as well.
Okay.
Historically, some theists really saw infinity as a divine attribute,
Okay.
right? Something that couldn't be applied to the created world.
So a universe that's infinitely large.
Would be encroaching on God's territory.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So they argued that only God could be truly infinite,
Uh-huh.
and to ascribe infinity to the universe would be like a form of pantheism,
Okay.
right? Blurring the lines between creator and creation.
But didn't we say that some modern cosmological models, like those based on a flat universe,
Yes.
suggest that the universe might actually be
Infinite in size.
infinite in size?
Right. And that's kind of revived this whole debate about infinity and its theological implications.
Okay.
So some theists have embraced the idea of an infinite universe,
Okay.
arguing that it reflects, God's boundless power and creativity.
So it's almost like they're saying, hey, if God is infinite,
Yeah.
why wouldn't he create an infinite universe?
Exactly.
It's a way of seeing the vastness of the cosmos as like a
As a testament
to God's grandeur.
to God's grandeur, exactly. But of course, the idea of an infinite universe also presents like these really tricky
Yeah.
philosophical and theological puzzles.
Right.
Right. I mean, for instance, if the universe is truly infinite,
Yeah.
and if the laws of physics are the same throughout,
Mm-hmm.
then that implies there might be an infinite number of galaxies, stars, planets, even copies of ourselves out there.
Infinite copies of me. That's a scary thought.
Right.
But seriously, like, how do we even begin to wrap our minds around
Right. That's the challenge.
an infinity? And what does it mean for, our understanding of God's role in the universe?
These are questions that, philosophers and theologians
Yeah.
have been wrestling with for centuries.
Yeah.
And cosmology, with its ever-expanding view of the cosmos,
Yeah.
is only adding fuel to that fire.
It's like we're peeling back these layers of reality, only to find more and more mysteries underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we delve deeper into those mysteries, we're kind of forced to reevaluate our assumptions
Right?
about the universe, about God, about our place in this grand cosmic scheme.
It's a humbling
It
and
is.
awe-inspiring journey.
It is, but unfortunately we're running out of time for this segment of our deep dive.
Oh.
But we've covered a lot of ground.
We have it.
But there's still so much more to explore.
Right.
So in our next and final segment, we'll try to tie all these threads together and
Okay.
and leave our listeners with some final, thought-provoking ideas to ponder.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into cosmology and theology.
Yeah, it's been a real whirlwind tour, hasn't it?
It has. It has lots of like head-scratching moments.
Lots of head-scratching moments for sure.
But amidst all these cosmic revelations, what are like the key takeaways
Yeah.
for our listeners, especially those of us, approaching these questions from
Yeah.
a philosophical perspective?
Right. I think one of the most important takeaways is that scientific cosmology, while it's providing these incredibly precise descriptions of the universe, doesn't necessarily negate or invalidate theistic interpretations.
Okay.
Right? It's not a case of science like disproving God or religion.
Right.
Instead, it's offering new ways of understanding the universe, which in turn can lead to new ways of understanding the divine.
Right. And we've seen how like theistic responses to scientific findings have been
Yeah.
surprisingly like diverse and adaptable.
They have.
Some theists have like reinterpreted traditional doctrines like, ex nihilo creation
Right.
to accommodate the Big Bang,
Right.
while others have embraced concepts like creation continuance
Right.
to reconcile their beliefs with, like a steady state or a cyclical universe.
Absolutely. And then you have, the multiverse,
Yeah, the multiverse, right?
which some theists see as evidence for God's boundless creativity,
Right,
while others use it to argue for, the fine-tuning of our universe
right.
and the need for a designer. So it's like it really is a testament to the flexibility
Yeah.
and resilience of religious thought in the face of these, scientific challenges.
Yeah, definitely. But it's not just about like reinterpreting old doctrines
No.
or finding ways to fit God into the latest
Yeah.
cosmological model, right?
Right.
I mean, cosmology also raises like these profound philosophical questions
Absolutely.
that go beyond just the realm of science, right?
They do, yeah.
Questions that have like captivated thinkers
For millennia.
for millennia, right?
Yes.
Questions about the nature of time,
Yes.
the meaning of causality,
The possibility of
the
infinity,
existence of other universes.
the fate of our own universe.
Right, all these things that cosmology just kind of throws
Throws into sharp relief.
into sharp relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as our cosmological models become more sophisticated, they're likely to raise even more
Even more.
profound and challenging questions.
Absolutely.
So it's an exciting time
It is.
to be a philosopher, right?
It is, yeah.
To be grappling with these like fundamental questions
Fundamental questions.
about the nature of reality
Yes.
and our place within it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a reminder that, philosophy is not it's not a static discipline
Right.
confined to, dusty old books.
Right.
It's a living, breathing field of inquiry
Right.
that really thrives on engagement with these latest scientific discoveries
Mhm.
and the deepest mysteries of the universe.
Yeah, okay. So as we reach the end of our deep dive
Yeah.
here, I want to leave our listeners with a final
Yes.
provocative
A
thought
provocative thought.
to ponder. So we've explored all these different
Many different
cosmological models,
cosmological models, yeah.
each with its own like set of implications for understanding God, creation,
Yeah.
the universe, but regardless of which model, turns out to be
Closest to reality.
closest to reality, right? One question remains. What is the nature of the relationship
That's the question.
between the universe as described by science
Yes.
and the divine?
And the divine.
Is conceived by religion.
That's the question that I think each of us has to wrestle with individually,
Right.
Informed by our own, philosophical inclinations and spiritual beliefs.
Right.
There's no easy answer. There's no single right way to reconcile those two ways of knowing.
Right.
But the very act of engaging with these questions, of trying to make sense
Yeah.
of this vastness and complexity
Universe.
of the universe
Yeah.
can be a deeply enriching and transformative experience.
Well said. And on that note,
Yeah.
we will bid farewell to our listeners.
Yes.
May your contemplations be filled with cosmic insights.
Cosmic insight.
And philosophical breakthroughs.
Absolutely. Until next time,
Yeah,
keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into those mysteries of the universe.
absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.